Hello viewers, welcome back. It's your boy, the Grumpy Penguin, with another episode of Project Fairlady, my 1968 SR20 powered Datsun Roadster. All right viewers, on the last episode we went ahead and got the body put back on the chassis, clearance a little bit for the tunnel, engines in the engine bay, looking fantastic, fitting great. And the next step is going to be start to work on the intake and exhaust manifolds, get the turbo mounted where we need it, get the downpipe on, start building the exhaust itself, and figure out where that has to be clearance through chassis rails and all of those obstacles from the cross brace and stuff like that. So come along with me. We're going to get started with the intake side and fitting that absolutely massive inlet manifold. So the age-old question of will it fit? And I'm going to start with probably not. Holy crap. Yeah.
Don't worry about it. You're still in good shape. All you got to do is just tap it in. Just tap it in now.
All right. Maybe this thing will fit without the throttle body. Oh, that's a big yes. I don't know if the hood will close, but shit. While the older motor was still in here, I ended up upgrading the radiator to an aluminum 3-core unit for the U20. It actually cooled that car down really well. I'm going to attempt to reuse it. The CX Racing radiator seems to be the one everyone goes to, but this actually seems to have the inlet and outlet ports kind of right in the right spot. It fits. It's got nutserts for a fan, for an electric fan, which is what I'm going to run. So, and it's got all the brackets and stuff to make it fit. So I did buy the CX Racing one if this one doesn't work, but the core is actually slightly bigger than the CX Racing, and it's still a 3-core unit. So I imagine it's going to cool the SR just fine. So I'm going to try using it, make an attempt. I think I am going to modify it, and I think I am going to run AN fittings for the hoses, for the radiator hoses, just kind of to be blingy, for lack of a better term. It doesn't really need it. It's not a drag racing car, but I think it will benefit that way. So get this bolted in, measure for an intercooler, and start figuring out intercooler piping. All right, so a little update on the hot side of the engine. I mocked up the exhaust manifold that I was going to be using. Was pretty happy with where I had everything, but I measured pretty much completely incorrectly. I did not take into account the wastegate actuator and the wastegate arm moving, and I just mounted the turbo too close to the head. So unfortunately, that's gonna have to get changed. My good friend Ethan, his videos, or his video of his Thunderbird I showed earlier on this channel is like a master fabricator. He did the welding for me because I'm not that confident with my TIG welding ability. So he actually welded everything up. It looks beautiful. He did a fantastic job, but I screwed up. Totally my fault. I screwed up with the measurements. So next step, I think, is to really contemplate what I'm gonna do on the whole hot side of this engine. I'm gonna rethink the turbocharger, the manifold, and the downpipe, because after kind of getting everything mocked up in space with a manifold, I realized that the downpipe is not going to clear where I thought it would. There's a steering shaft in the way, and while I could make this car right-hand drive and solve some issues, it would create other issues, so just going to kind of roll with what I've got. But I think I'm going to need to do some cutting of the body to clear the downpipe. No big deal. This thing's pretty much hacked to bits at this point anyway. Just cut it out, make it bigger, re-weld stronger back in, you'll be fine. But that said, does change my mind a little bit on where I may want the turbocharger, how I'm going to deal with heat of the turbocharger next to critical components like the brake and the clutch master cylinder, and just kind of rethinking that whole hot side. Putting the whole hot side on pause for the moment, which brings us over to the cold side and some of the other issues I want to address over here. Number one being the only thing about this mount kit that I don't really care for. I know why it's done the way it is. There was absolutely no room on putting this passenger side mount anywhere else, but right under the oil filter. It does leave clearance for the oil filter. It does work. You could run a standard filter and get it on and off of there. Just with a large intake plenum like I plan on using, it would be very difficult to get that filter kind of fished down in there. And it's going to just make a huge mess every time because it catches it right into the motor mount. So the easy solution is just to remote mount the oil filter, and that takes care of a couple other issues. One is the remote mount kit I bought is actually going to delete the heat exchanger, the water to oil heat exchanger that is on the SRs from the factory. They're not prone to failure. I've done plenty of track days with one installed on a previous 240 I've owned, but it does add a little bit of thermal load to the radiator, which I'm trying to shed any kind of thermal load possible for that, and it is kind of just more obtrusive into where this engine bay is because everything's so tight in here. So I think I'm going to remote mount a filter up here on the firewall. I think that's going to work out really well, and when I plumb it in, I'll probably also plumb in a heat exchanger in the front. I am going to make it thermostatically controlled, so there's going to be a lot of pipes and hoses and shit running everywhere, but it's just going to be kind of how it is. Because when this thing's on the track, I do want the oil to be cooled. That is a weak point of the SRs, is oil cooling. So adding an external cooler really helps these motors live a lot longer, and it creates a little bit more oil capacity. They aren't huge oil capacity engines anyway, unless you add like a Greddy sump, which doesn't fit because of the frame rails on this car. So any kind of extra capacity I'm going to take advantage of. So go ahead and get the heat exchanger pulled off, put the new one on, and let's cue the dubstep music. And are we doing dubstep? Let's do dubstep, not trap. We'll do dubstep today. Cue the dubstep and let's take it apart in really fast time. All right, that pretty much wraps it up for this episode of Project Fairlady. Did a little bit of planning. Hopefully I have a pretty good idea now of where things are gonna go. The next step's gonna be doing a little bit more hacking to the body work to get the hot side done. I did manage to mount that oil cooler or oil relocation kit today, solve one of those little problems with the clearancing issues in this car. So next time, hopefully I'll be getting those lines finished up being made, and get the oil cooler in place. We'll be getting an intercooler in place and keep on moving forward with this project. So if you like what you saw, give me a thumbs up, hit like, hit subscribe, hit the bell. That'll alert you to more Project Fairlady videos. If you didn't like what you saw and you're upset that I'm destroying the purity of this 1968 Datsun Roadster, then smash that dislike button. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.